We have reports from Paris that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident.
Frances told me a few years later that she was sort of thrilled at the way that Diana sort of freed herself, as she saw it, from the shackles of royalty and from being a member of the royal family.
A genetic marker found in only 14 people on the entire planet. 13 in India, 1 in Nepal, 0 in Europe, just turned up, scientifically confirmed, in Princess Diana's direct maternal bloodline.
And the bottom line is, we worked on this for 3 years, and then every single aspect of what we did, every single allegation, we brought it down to 104 allegations, and each and every one was investigated.
In 2013, Dr. Jim Wilson at the University of Edinburgh ran the test on DNA from 2 of Diana's maternal relatives and stared at the result in disbelief. He reran it twice. It didn't change. Somewhere in the Spencer family's officially documented aristocratic English bloodline, a woman had been erased so completely it took 200 years and a breakthrough in genetic science to find her. The DNA discovery. The samples arrived in 2 small vials of saliva from 2 women with an unbroken mother-to-daughter connection stretching back over 2 centuries. Both third cousins of Diana's mother, Frances Shand Kidd. They had been selected precisely because of what they shared. Not a name, not a title, but a biological chain of descent stretching back into a part of history the Spencer family had. Worked very hard to bury.
The blood of Henri Paul was taken. He was found to have very, very high carbon monoxide in his blood.
Dr. Wilson and his team, working alongside the genetic ancestry company Britain's DNA, focused on mitochondrial DNA, the one type that passes completely intact from mother to daughter, generation after generation, unchanged. No man who ever entered the family could alter it. No marriage, no legal document, no rewritten genealogy could touch it. It is a biological record that no family can edit. The team scanned hundreds of markers. Routine test. Aristocratic bloodline. Confirmed. Except it wasn't. The samples belonged to haplogroup R30b. Out of more than 65,000 people in their worldwide database, only 14 carried it. 13 in India. 1 in Nepal. Not 1 European in the entire dataset. Dr. Wilson later told reporters the evidence was unassailable, confirmed independently by 2 living relatives who didn't even know each other. Not contamination, not a statistical anomaly, a clear, undeniable trail. R30b and its closely related branches are entirely south. Asian in origin, no ambiguity, no alternative reading.
The blood samples from Diana, which was still in existence, thank the Lord, and found that the French pathologist had taken the blood from the cavity in the chest of Diana rather than her heart. And when that was done and re-examined, then the carbon monoxide levels came down to an understandable level.
Its presence in Diana's maternal line meant one thing. Approximately 7 generations before Diana, a woman with South Asian ancestry had entered the direct line, not a distant cousin. The direct line, mother to daughter to daughter to daughter, all the way to Diana herself. The official Spencer family history, in every genealogy book, every royal biography, every wedding program, was missing someone. Someone real, someone deliberately removed. And whoever did it was so thorough that it took 2 centuries and modern genetic science to find the gap. Eliza Kewark, the woman they erased. Her name was Eliza Kewark, and for over 2 centuries she did not exist. Not in the Spencer genealogies, not in any royal biography, not in a single public family record before 2013. She had been removed so completely that even the people carrying her DNA had no idea she was part of their story. She was born around 1790 in Surat, a port, city on India's western coast in what is now Gujarat, one of India's great commercial crossroads, where merchant ships from a dozen nations crowded the harbor. Traders shouted in a patchwork of languages, and goods and people and cultures collided in the narrow streets every single day. Surat had been a gateway between worlds for centuries. The Portuguese had traded there. The Mughals had governed it. The British East India Company had established its first Indian factory there in 1608. By the time Eliza was born, it was a city built on movement, on transaction, on the constant friction of cultures pressing against each other. It was the kind of place where a woman of mixed heritage could exist without drawing too much attention, where the clean lines the British Empire tried to draw between colonizer and colonized blurred constantly in the heat and commerce of daily life. Eliza's father carried the Armenian name Kewark, and she signed her own letters in Armenian script. That detail would later become the family's most useful lie. But her mother's line, the one carrying 30 billion rand, was South Asian. As a young woman, Eliza became the companion of Theodore Forbes, a Scottish merchant who arrived in Surat around 1809 to work for the East India Company. Forbes was the younger son of a landowning family from Boynley, near Aberdeen, ambitious, calculating, determined to build a career in the empire's most lucrative outpost. He employed Eliza as his housekeeper. The reality of their relationship went far deeper than any job title. Together they had 2 children, a daughter named Catherine, born in 1812, and a son named Alexander, born 2 years later. For a time, the family lived together, first in Surat, then in Mocha, Yemen, where Theodore was appointed British political resident. His official duties were to purchase coffee for the East India Company and monitor the shipping lanes at the entrance to the Red Sea. But letters from this period reveal that Eliza always was far more than a domestic servant. Theodore relied on her multilingual abilities. She translated for him. She facilitated diplomatic contacts with local merchants and officials. By every private measure, they were a family. But as Theodore's career advanced and he accepted a prestigious partnership in Bombay, the social realities of British India closed in around them like a trap. In the drawing rooms and gentlemen's clubs of colonial Bombay, a companion with Indian blood wasn't just frowned upon. She was a career-ending liability. The era of relative racial tolerance was ending fast. A rigid new social order was setting in, one that drew sharp lines between the colonizers and everyone else. There was no room in that world for what Theodore and Eliza had built, and Theodore chose his career. He left Eliza and the children behind in Surat. He moved to Bombay alone, lodged with friends, attended society dinners, accepted invitations to the homes of other company men and their European wives, and built a new life without them. He didn't even write to Eliza directly. When decisions needed to be made about the children's futures, their education, their passage to Europe, their very fate, Theodore had intermediaries handle the correspondence. The woman who had borne his children, translated his diplomatic exchanges, and helped run his household across 2 countries, was reduced to a logistical problem, a loose end to be managed at arm's length. Then something happened that still haunts this story 2 centuries later. Years after Theodore's death, a packet of letters written in a non-European script was discovered at the Forbes family estate in Boynley, Scotland. They had been sitting in a drawer for decades, untouched, unread, gathering dust in a country Eliza had likely never seen and never would. When scholars finally examined them, they knew immediately what they were holding. The letters were from Eliza, written in broken English, dictated to a Parsi scribe because her written English wasn't strong enough, and signed in her own hand in Armenian script. Letter after letter, spanning years, all carrying the same desperate plea to be allowed to see her daughter one last time before Catherine was sent away to Europe forever. In one letter, she wrote, "My good sir, I pray you let me know. By your leave, I will bring my child to give in your hand by myself." A mother asking permission. Permission to hand her own daughter over, knowing that once she did, she would never see that child again, knowing that an ocean and an empire stood between them, and still she offered to make the journey herself, just to hold Catherine one last time. Nobody answered. When Theodore died at sea in 1820, everything collapsed. His will described Eliza only as his housekeeper. He called Catherine his reputed natural daughter. Every word was surgical. Every word chosen to sever any legal or social connection between Eliza and the family she had helped build. Catherine, just 8 years old, was put on a ship bound for Scotland, accompanied only by a servant named Fazagul, an 8-year-old girl who had never seen snow, never felt a Scottish winter, never heard English spoken as a first language, loaded onto a vessel and sent across the world to live with relatives she had never met in a country she could not have imagined. She never saw her mother again. Young Alexander made it to Scotland too, but he was so desperately homesick that he was eventually sent back to Surat to be with Eliza. The Forbes family let the boy go. They kept the girl. If this story has you questioning everything you thought you knew about royal bloodlines, subscribe now. There's more where this came from. Catherine stayed. She adapted. She learned to speak, dress, and behave as if India had never existed. In time, she married well. And through Catherine, this hidden bloodline didn't just survive, it thrived. Catherine gave birth to a daughter. That daughter had a daughter, and on it went, generation after generation, until the line produced Ruth, then Frances, then a girl born on the 1st of July, 1961, at Park House on the Sandringham estate. Her name was Diana Frances Spencer, 7 generations. A port city on the western coast of India to the most watched wedding in television history. And nobody ever told the truth about where that bloodline began, because the silence wasn't accidental. It was engineered, the 2-century cover-up. Sometime in the 19th century, someone sat down with the Spencer family genealogy and where Eliza Kewark's name should have appeared, wrote one word instead: Armenian. It may have been a clerk, a family member, a solicitor hired for this exact purpose, but whoever held the pen was not correcting a mistake. They were building a lie designed to last 200 years, and it worked. Eliza's surname, Kewark, was close enough to the Armenian name Kevork. She signed letters in Armenian, script. Her father may genuinely have had Armenian roots. That single thread became the entire official story. Armenian meant Christian. Armenian meant respectable. Armenian meant safely European adjacent. A harmless colonial footnote, easily absorbed, easily forgotten. Indian heritage, by contrast, would have been treated as a permanent stain. A contamination that no amount of wealth, no advantageous marriage, no title could ever wash away. So the record was quietly changed, the genealogy rewritten, and the family moved forward as if Eliza Kewark of Surat had never drawn breath. The cover-up didn't last one generation. It lasted over 200 years. Family trees, marriage registers, church records, private correspondence, all of it carefully maintained around the central fiction. By the 20th century, the lie was so deeply embedded that no living person questioned it. When Diana married Prince Charles at St. Paul's Cathedral in 1981, in front of 750 million television viewers, the official biographies still described Eliza Kewark as Armenian. Nobody in the Spencer family challenged it. Nobody in the royal household challenged it. The secret held through 2 world wars, through the collapse of the British Empire, through the most watched wedding in human history. Until 2013, when 2 vials of saliva blew it open. After the DNA results were published, reporters tracked down Diana's maternal aunt, a woman named Mary Roach, one of the few living people who had grown up hearing the old family stories. When they told her what the DNA had revealed, she paused. Then she said, "I always assumed that I was part Armenian, so I am delighted that I also have an Indian background." A woman in Princess Diana's own family had lived her entire life believing a story that was genetically false. She didn't know. Her mother didn't know. Her grandmother didn't know. Generation after generation, the women in this family had passed down Eliza's mitochondrial DNA in their cells while passing down the Armenian cover story at their dinner tables. The lie had been so complete, so thoroughly maintained across so many generations, that even the people carrying the DNA had no idea what it actually was. The biological truth and the family mythology had traveled side by side for 200 years, and nobody noticed they told completely different stories. The real history had been written in their cells the entire time. It just took science to finally read it. More royal than the royals. Here is where the story flips. When Diana's engagement to Prince Charles was announced in 1981, the editors of Burke's Peerage, the definitive record of British aristocracy, issued a public statement that stunned even the royal household. Lady Diana Spencer, they declared, had more English royal blood running through her veins than her future husband. The Spencers were, in their exact words, stiff with royal connections. The woman whose family had spent 2 centuries hiding an Indian ancestor turned out to be more royal than the prince she was marrying. That royal blood didn't flow through official marriages or grand alliances negotiated between kingdoms. It came through mistresses. Barbara Villiers, Louise de Keroualle, and Nell Gwynn each held the affections of King Charles II. a monarch famous for fathering more than a dozen children with women who would never become queen. The Spencer family traces its lineage through not one, not two, but three of these royal bloodlines. Their children were born outside the rules of succession, but over centuries their bloodlines quietly wove themselves into the fabric of the English aristocracy, generation by generation, until they produced Lady Diana Spencer. Diana descended from Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Grafton, and Charles Lennox, Duke of Richmond, both illegitimate sons of Charles II. 11 generations back, she was also a direct descendant of Mary, Queen of Scots, executed in 1587 on the orders of her cousin Elizabeth I. The Spencer estate at Althorpe had stood since 1508, outlasting wars, dynasties, and the rise and fall of entire monarchies. The royal family's own surname, Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, was thoroughly German until King George V quietly renamed them Windsor in 1917 to avoid wartime backlash from a British public at war with Germany. By the oldest reckoning, Diana wasn't marrying up. Charles was. The family that had erased a woman from India to protect their standing had produced the most consequential bride in modern royal history. The Spencers had guarded their secret so fiercely for so long that by the time Diana walked down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral, the irony was invisible to every person in that building, to the 750 million watching on television, to the royal family seated in the front rows, to Diana herself. Nobody told the truth, not until the DNA spoke for itself. The line ends. This is where the story closes, and it closes hard. Prince William carries the same rare R30b mitochondrial marker that began its journey in Gujarat over 200 years ago. It passed through Eliza Kewark, crossed oceans, survived colonial prejudice, outlasted 2 centuries of deliberate erasure, and landed in the DNA of the man who will one day sit on the British throne. The autosomal markers across the genomes of Diana's 2 maternal cousins confirmed they carried between 0.3 and 0.8% South Asian ancestry, meaning William himself almost certainly carries a small but real portion of Indian DNA inherited directly from Eliza. He will be the first British monarch with scientifically confirmed Indian ancestry. The Commonwealth, home to over 1 billion people of South Asian descent, will one day be led by a king who carries a direct genetic link to their region in his very cells, not through diplomacy, not through a symbolic gesture or a carefully worded press release, through his actual biology, written in the same molecular code that Eliza Kewark passed to Catherine on the docks of Surat more than 2 centuries ago. That is not symbolism. That is not a diplomatic gesture. That is not a feel-good headline. That is biology written into the DNA of a man who will wear the crown. But here's the final twist. And this one does not have a happy ending. Mitochondrial DNA flows only from mother to child. Men carry it, but they cannot pass it on. William inherited the R30b marker from Diana, but his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, will not inherit it from him. They will inherit their mitochondrial DNA from their mother, Catherine, not from William, not from Diana, not from Eliza. The marker ends with William and his brother Harry, 2 men, that is it, the last carriers on this line. After them, R30b vanishes from the British royal family forever, not through scandal, not through exposure, but through the simple, indifferent mechanics of biology. The ancient genetic thread that traveled from a port city on the western coast of India, through 7 generations of English women, across continents, through centuries of enforced silence, all the way to the steps of Buckingham Palace. That thread ends here, not with a catastrophe, not with a scandal, not with some dramatic revelation, just quietly, biologically, irreversibly. Eliza Kewark was erased from the family records. Her letters gathered dust in a Scottish drawer for nearly 200 years. Her name was replaced with a convenient lie. Her heritage was stripped from every document the family could reach. She fought to see her daughter one last time, and they wouldn't even answer her letters. They buried her name. They rewrote her story. They turned her into someone she wasn't. And now, 200 years later, even her DNA, the one thing they could never rewrite, the last whisper of proof that she ever existed in this bloodline, will be gone. The Spencers spent 200 years hiding this woman. If they buried this, what else do you think? The world's most powerful families are still keeping buried? Subscribe now, because the stories they don't want you to hear are always the ones most worth telling. And tell us in the comments, what other secrets do you think history's most powerful families are still hiding?